So
Yeah.
2013-14, I believe the season was where you were kind of thrust into the first team at times, which, well, ironically, when you were on such a high, being in and around the club, the first team of the football club that you've supported all your life, the club was probably at its, well, I don't even think there's a probably about it. The club was at its lowest ebb.
Yep.
Obviously playing at Northampton, points deducted, that summer where it was all announced. What was the atmosphere like around the club? I can't imagine it would have been a very nice place to be.
Oh, it was incredible because you were also surrounded by these guys that were tremendous pros in the world. Like you had people like John Fleck, Joe Murphy, Callum Wilson, Cyrus Christie, all those guys in the change room, and it's like it was just a totally different environment. Because I think that you've got that side of fear, the fear of what could happen. I was obviously in a different position because I was an apprentice at the time. But it was really weird, and I think it was a really difficult time for me because I had to find the balance between being a fan and then being a player. Yeah. And I had to be really careful about what I said, what I spoke about. You obviously, I remember being in a meeting with the first team with Joyce Apala, a breakfast meeting with Joyce Apala, and I'll never repeat what was on in there, but I walked out of there as a fan, and I couldn't believe it. And as a player who's in there, I think it's sometimes interesting when you go sign for a club, you may not have an emotional connection to that club. Well, I had an emotional connection to Coventry. So you're right. So I was at my highest point, training with the first team. When you're a goalkeeper, you're very fortunate you get to train with the first team a lot because they need the bodies. But then as a fan, I'm thinking, my goodness, look at my club here. And you did get a sense of it. You did get a sense of it. Budget tightened up, travel tightened up, food opportunities tightened up, all those things. It started to become very disengaged between the first team and the academy. There was a lot of time where the academy was up at Brighton, and the money got shorter. So there was a time where the academy would go train at Brighton, but then the academy players couldn't eat in the Brighton change room because the first team players were actually having to pay dues for their lunch, which is just incredible. And I highly doubt that's the same now. It might be now. It might just be a £10 a month due, which is absolutely fine, just to skin in the game. But it was a really, really interesting place. And not only that, I was obviously working with Steve Grisovich a lot of the time. He's a legend. And it was just, like me and him would sometimes talk about it. And obviously he's a big fan and someone that's came through the club for a long, long time. But it was just you really had to work hard to find that balance between work and then being a fan. And then that's when it would get challenging. For example, when I'd come with my dad and be with his friends, people want to know, but I think my dad and his friends always did a really good job of not putting me in an uncomfortable situation. Yeah. Because it was definitely weird, and there was times when I remember when I never made the bench. I made the squad a few times. I made the squad away at Swindon, which was a great experience, warming up with all the fans behind. And then I made a bench a few times at a home game, but all the home games were at Northampton.
Yeah.
So it's just such an interesting experience. And at the time, you had others that were just coming into the fold, like Matters was coming in, and then you had Ryan Haynes was playing, Ivor Lawton was playing, Jack Finch was playing. Like all these guys were playing. It was just such an interesting situation where the academy was becoming so reliant. And then you mix that with, at the time, you probably the oldest player in the squad would have been Joe Murphy, who was still young. But then you had Cyrus playing, Jordan Clark playing, Callum Wilson had just come back from injury. You had all these guys. It was just such an interesting environment. But I think the flip side to it is that it created this really cool togetherness. And remember, if there was a year where you had Callum Wilson and Leon Clark, and they just tore it up. They just tore it up because I think what the players realize is that this is what we have. At the end of the day, we can't change what's going on, but we can control ultimately what's happening on the pitch. And then Stephen Presley was phenomenal at that.
Carry on. Yeah, carry on.
Sorry. To cut you off there. Stephen Presley was, when Stephen Presley came in, I will say that, and he was a very intense guy. that him and Ian McFarlane brought in a really, really, really cool environment where it was all about competing and winning and forgetting everything else that was going on. And he was going to go deal with that. He was going to take that away. And Stephen Presley really, 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 sometimes not by choice, had to engage the academy big time. And it was interesting because Stephen Presley really tried to then implement his style all the way through. And if you go back and watch academy games from when he was there, it was always a high press. It was always a how could we play it from the back. It was quite cool to see. But I think going back to it was just such an interesting time. And you know what? Now I look back, I am glad that I'm thankful for that time as well.
Yeah.
Because yeah.
So talking about Stephen Presley as a fan, obviously, well, you've seen him from both sides as a fan and as a player. I always got the impression he was a man who wore his heart on his sleeve. Probably not afraid to, I know you mentioned you don't like to name drop, but probably not afraid to give a bit of a hairdryer treatment out as well. And he also struck me as somebody, he would only want to do it his way. Is that probably fair?
Yes and no. I've definitely seen the hairdryer. I actually seen it before a game. I'm not going to say the player's name. It was him and quite a senior player at Northampton before the game, and it was quite heated. He was a very, very, very passionate guy. Unbelievably passionate. Cared tremendously about the people around him. I would say that you always want to be on the right side of him. That's for sure. And especially him and Ian McFarlane, they worked very close together, but you always wanted to be on the right side of him. But, you're probably right in saying he wanted to do it his way. He was a cool guy. Like he was. I mean, I've had the hair dry treatment from it. I remember in a five-a-side game, I mean, he was a scary guy. When he got going, he was a really scary guy. But like little things, he was really, really cool. So after the year I got released, I came back at Christmas. And then I was sitting behind the dugout. At first, I'd come back after Christmas and I was coming in and training with the club. So when I came out to America, I was coming back, training with the club. But to talk about Stephen Presley, as I went to a game and I was training with the club and he's seen me in the stands, at half time, as he's come back out, he's actually walked up into the stand and come and see me and give me a hug. And I think someone snapped a picture of it. I think it's actually on my Instagram with it, but it was a really, really, really cool moment because he didn't need to do that. Which is a kid, 19 years old. He didn't need to do that. But I think that goes back to the togetherness he tried to create, that everyone should feel valued.
Do you think he tried to create a bit of an us against the world mentality with the problems the club was facing at the time?
Absolutely. I really, really, really do. And you got that from meetings, no matter what the outside factors were. This is what we can control. He's going to go fight that battle with the board, with the directors, whatever it is. He's going to fight that. But for what we can control, this is what we can control. We play Swindon on Saturday. We can control Swindon on Saturday. So yeah, I absolutely would. And I think it was felt. I think it was felt all the way throughout. Because it was almost, it sounds crazy to use this word, it was almost embarrassing as well. As a fan. Like I almost felt that embarrassment going into work that this is my club and this is what I'm seeing. You're in writing, you're seeing it. You're seeing the stress of people, you're seeing the stress of players, you're seeing all these things. It was like, I think he then kept coming back round to this is it. This is what we're working, And I don't remember a time where players didn't get paid. I don't remember any of those times. He fought for people. He did fight for people. And he brought a staff in with him that fought for people too. Again, it's funny, I don't know if everyone would agree, because you're right, he was someone that, just because of his persona and the way he came across, he could rub people the wrong way. Because not everyone, I've always been a player that has probably dealt with when a coach is quite on it or aggressive, but that's always suited me. I've always wanted to know where I stand. Not a lot of players like that. So, I don't know. I would say this, someone like James Maddison would in my opinion, you don't ever speak highly of Presley because he gave him a shot.
Yeah.
He gave him a shot, you know.
So as a young lad going into that dressing room, you know, you mentioned it was quite a youthful setup, but you've got the likes of Leon Clark, you know, Joe Murphy in particular, obviously being a goalkeeper. And I rate Joe Murphy as one of the best keepers I've seen in a City shirt. Carl Baker, amongst others. What was it like going into that dressing room for the first time?
Daunting, really daunting, because you're entering a whole different world. You're entering a world where, you know, at a young age, you see the life they live. And as much as that's probably not the right thing, it's hard to not see that. You know, daunting, a lot of personalities. You don't want to mess up. You don't want to be late. But then you also don't want to be too on the flip side to it, is that going above and beyond to do everything, because then they'll pick up on it. It was like, it's a really, really fine line. It's an intimidating experience. I was really fortunate because Joe was incredible. And I was really fortunate I got to train with Kieran Westwood a lot, who was also incredible, but Kieran was totally different at first. Kieran was very standoffish at first. You know, again, another phenomenal goalkeeper, probably my favorite ever goalkeeper for Coventry. Used to love it. And when I got to train with him, it was just an absolute dream come true. But then Murph was super inclusive. You really wanted to have a fun time in training. And then you had Murphy, you had Lee Burge. And I'd grew up through the academy with Burgee, so it was a lot of fun to train with him. But there was a time where it was Murph, Lee Burge, myself, and then Jake Richards. So it was literally 2 first-team goalkeepers, 2 academy goalkeepers.
Yeah.
So it was really interesting. So when
you probably couldn't have called Burgee a first-team goalkeeper then, really, because he probably hadn't. I don't think he would have made an appearance by then.
Well, no, he hadn't, because Murph was playing. But what Burgee was doing, Burgee was on the bench for the first team, so he was second choice, playing for the 23s. So he did not stop. He did not stop because he was required to play for the 23s, or we'd play for the 23s, and then he'd be on the first team bench. But like there'd be times like where, especially in pre-season where it's heavy games, there'd be 4-goal games. So all 4s are in goal. And when you hear the shout from the gaffer to come over and play, like, you're like, I can't mess up. And I remember messing up sometimes. Cyrus was so great with me from such a young age, but he'd turn around and they'd lose it at you. Not at you, but just the competitive environment that they're in.
Yeah.
And Fleck was the same. Like there was Carl Baker was the same, but as soon as you left the pitch, they were great. The moment they were on the pitch, you were very fearful of, you know, messing up. Especially
it's a case of crossing that white line, and you know it's a completely different world.
Agreed.
So we're going to move on to something now, which, you know, this, by the way, for people watching, this is completely off the cuff. This is not you know, pre-rehearsed or anything. But I'm going to talk about something that I don't know whether you're comfortable talking about it or not. But being told you're no longer required, or being told you're not being kept on, did that kind of spur you on, or were you just completely distraught?
It's an interesting one, because at that time we knew, and the reason we knew is because the financials. We kind of knew that it was going to be really difficult for those second years to get pros, and at the time Ryan Haynes was the only one that signed a pro, and that happened a little bit before, and Haynesy was in the team a lot. I remember as a second year, and we knew. I don't think you were ever really prepared. I think you could ask any scholar in the country in England who's been told that they're being released. I remember doing it, went upstairs. I kind of had an idea, because at the time you have an agent too. At that point, like you know, a very low level agent who just going to guide you through the process. So I had an agent, and we kind of knew it was going to happen. And I remember going into Brighton, I think it was a Tuesday night, and I had a meeting with Presley, Ian McFarland, Darren Murphy was in there, and then Ian Fox, I believe, was in there. So there was 4 of them in there.
Yeah.
And then me, Mum, Dad. And I remember saying they're not going to get off a new contract, and I was prepared. And then This moment will stay me for life. President said, you know, we really, really, really like you, Alex. We appreciate you. We know, and we're going to help take care of you. And my mum cut in, and she went around me saying, and she says, with all due respect, sir, or however she said it, with all due respect, he's going to be all right.
Mm.
And I just thought straight, it was just super powerful moment. Because
Yeah.
my mum and my parents did a phenomenal job of always staying out there. They never got involved with coaches. Happens too much now where parents get involved with coaches. And they always let me deal with that. But when my mum said that, and she said that to the first team manager at that point, he's going to be all right, there was never an issue. There was never an issue. And I knew, and I had no expectation to get a contract. And truth be told, I was probably ready for a change. And then it happened very, very, very quickly with the next steps. But you were difficult. Yeah, you know what? At first, I remember that evening calling Courtney Baker Richardson, who had also been released at about 9 o'clock. And we were like, should we go out for a beer? He thought about it. And then I said, you know what? Like, is there any point? We've got training tomorrow. We're still going to go in and practice. You know, we're still training. Like, let's not just let's not just blow this off. Like, you know, there's something out there for all of us. And Courtney's still playing. But like, I literally remember I went over to my ex-girlfriend's house at the time. I was in a bedroom upstairs and on the phone to Courtney saying, shall we go out for a beer? And he was interested in it. And we never did. And we were in a training day after. We're still playing. There's a group of us that still continue to play, released. Because we loved it. It was out of our hands at that point.
So do you feel as though, you know, the club was in the situation it was in? If you'd have been in the position, you know, if you'd have been in that boat a year before or a year later, you maybe would have stayed?
Oh, I don't know, because you also never know what the coach thinks of you. You know, truth be told, I don't know if I was good enough. When it's all said and done, if I'm going to be really honest with myself, I probably wasn't good enough. You know, I probably, you know, when I watched Lee Burge, like, who I know was 4 years older than me, I watched him train. I thought, man, I can't move like this. Very strong, athletic. You know, I don't know if I was good enough. So when it's all said and done, maybe they would have, because there'd have been a plan for the 23s. They need the bodies. But, you know, I really don't know the answer to that, because it's such a subjective answer. Of course, you'd love to think so. You'd love to think that they'd have kept you on, but I also don't know. I think maybe it worked out in the favor of the club at the time, making those decisions that they had no other choice. Because the year below me, the scholars below me had James Madison, Kean Harries, George Thomas.
Yeah.
All three players that have all gone on and been a pro. Dion Kelly Evans, Devon Kelly Evans. You had all those guys.
Yeah.
Who've still all made a career. So I think they also knew that was a very talented year group.
Yeah.
That's no disrespect to my year group, who had some really talented players too. But like at the same time, it's like I don't know, you know. I don't know. And I went on trial I remember going on trial to Cheltenham. And they're just like, I'd come from Coventry where we were very spoiled, and this is no disrespect to Cheltenham at all. And I drove up to Cheltenham, trained in the morning. As I got to training, they said to me, will you go and grab some training kit? I have that room in there. Open the door. It's just a room of old gear.
Yeah.
And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. And that was me coming from Coventry, where we were so spoiled. And that wasn't my ego, but I was like, there's more to life here. There is more to life. There's more to life. Yeah.
So one final thing on Cov before we move on to your next steps. As you mentioned just then, you carried on playing after you were told that you were going to be released, and quite vividly, I remember coming to your last game in the academy. I went with your dad. I think you beat Huddersfield 3-2.
Did. I remember it. We beat Huddersfield 3-2.
Yeah. And I just remember at the end, the final whistle blew. Everybody, it was the last game of the academy season, and all the parents and all the players all just kind of, it was quite emotional, actually. It must have been for you, and it must have been for the parents. Did that kind of just feel like as soon as that final whistle blew, that's a chapter of your life that's closed.
You know what? I really appreciate you bringing that up, because I forgot about that moment, and now I remember it all. And I remember there was a group of us, myself, Ryan Quinn, Courtney Baker Richardson, Jordan Smith, Eli Bacco, Jack Finch, Ryan Smith, and we all had been off contracts. Ryan Haynes, and Ivor Lawton, who was one of my best friends and still is to this day, was on the cusp. And I think Ivor went on to sign the pro, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, he picked up quite a nasty injury.
Yeah, and he was always, it was an interesting one. But I do remember then in that moment, I remember, and he will never mind me mentioning this, but me and Ryan Quinn didn't always see eye to eye, right? But I remember in that moment after the game, me and Quinn had a really big hug. Because I think the Huddersfield were rolling at the time. I think they were top. And I think we all just realised that we've just done something really cool for the last 6 years. We've given a lot of time and energy, money, all these different things, a big commitment to what we've done. And we've just beat Huddersfield. And I remember going in the change room after. And we all just chilled out in there. There was no rush to get out there. Usually there'd be sandwiches and we'd rush to get out. But I remember we were in there. We took pictures. I'm sure I could find these pictures somewhere, but we took pictures of me, Quinny, Jordan Smith, Ryan Smith, Jack Finch, just pictures of us in the change room after that game. And yeah, I think it was it was an interesting one because we were prepped for it. We knew it.
Yeah.
And I think on that day, all of the second years actually all started the game too. And it was much fun. We were a close group, that group. Those 2 years as well, with Dion, Devon, Madders, all that group were a really close group. We had a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun in that group. And
a really nice way to go out.
It was, because I do actually remember Huddersfield were at the top of the table, if I'm correct in saying it. And we're beaten 3-2. I remember it now. It's crazy. You say it was on the academy pitch, the 18th pitch. And at the time, the pitch was rubbish because the money.
Yeah.
And that pitch used to be a carpet. And the pitch was rubbish. They couldn't even do anything. They could just cut it. It was. It was a cool moment. See if I can find that picture for you, because I think you'd like that.